Welcome to the Office of the Leader of the Opposition Press Conference for Friday, the 30th, 2024. Joining today's press conference is Mr. Darren Adams, the Regional Chairman of Region Number 10. To his right is Ms. Nina Flube, Member of Parliament, Shadow Minister of Youth, Sport and Culture. And to her right, Mr. Mervyn Williams, CEC Member of the People's National Congress Reform. Today's press statement will be read in two parts, and we will begin with the statement from Mr. Darren Adams.
Thank you, Shanika. The people of Linden and Region 10 deserve better from the government. We wish to draw your attention to a critical issue that has been plaguing the Linden community and which has resulted in massive flooding and erosion that recently occurred in Linden. It is clear that a responsibility for this disaster lies squarely with the central government, who have consistently ignored the well-informed policy decisions and representations made by your elected council regarding the urgent need to upgrade the drainage systems in the region. Since 2020, the Regional Democratic Council has been advocating for the prioritization of drainage systems upgrades in Linden. This policy decision was unanimously voted on and supported by the local leaders, who understand the pressing need for effective drainage infrastructure to mitigate flooding and erosion risks. Despite these efforts, the central government has continuously disregarded these calls for action and, shockingly, removed over 50 proposed drains from budgets of 2021, 2022, 2023, and 2024 combined. It's frustrating to note that in the 2024 budget, the government approved funding for only 3 drains in the entire Region 10 under the capital program, a clear indicator of their misplaced priorities. Comparisons with other communities where funds were allocated for drainage system before road construction highlighted the discriminatory practices in allocation of resources towards Region 10. The blame being shifted onto the local leaders by the Prime Minister is unjust and unacceptable. The failure to execute sensible policies and allocate funds for critical infrastructure projects has directly contributed to the disastrous flooding and erosion in Linden. We urgently call upon the central government to reconsider its stance and provide funding for the over 50 drains that were submitted between the period 2020-2024 proposed budget by the RDC Region 10. The Prime Minister would be well advised that this is the proactive nature of actions advanced by the elected local leadership that should be emulated. Rather than running to visit communities already affected by flooding, the RDC and municipality are advocating the adoption of sensible policies that would ensure that either these occurrences do not happen in the first place, or in the instance of excessive rainfall, the effects are brief and manageable. Lindeners have managed disaster response on a local and national level before in an exemplary manner. During the unfortunate floods of 2005 that swept through the coastline, Linden was at the forefront of the emergency response that rescued nearly 4,000 Guyanese in a structured manner. Just a few years ago, when flooding hit the hinterland areas and Kokwani was inundated, Region 10 had activated its disaster response team even before the Civil Defense Commission, CDC, had reached out to attempt to do so. It is noteworthy that when the Prime Minister listed the agencies he had enlisted to respond in this instance, the RDC and the Mayor and Town Council were ignored. But the town clerk and the regional executive officers were listed as though these officers, who work for and on behalf of these councils, were the only persons who should be engaged in this response, confirming his government's intention to govern from Georgetown and direct the affairs of the people of the region and town through the officers with no regard for local governance. Local governance is important because local leaders are in touch with the unique needs of their communities. True consultation with residents and respect for local input would ensure that government budgets for the needs of the communities rather than simply creating earning opportunities for a few favorites. Fund the creation of a drainage plan for Linden. Build drains, then roads. The policy decision of the RDC Council, the first policy decision. It is not an emergency response if you sit in the capital and respond to this situation days or weeks afterwards, rather than taking advice and being proactive to avoid these occurrences. It is imperative that proper action is taken to rectify the situation and prevent future devastations in our community. The people of Linden deserve better, and it is time that central government takes responsibility for their negligence and prioritizes the welfare and safety of all citizens. We would like to thank the leader of the opposition who responded swiftly to Lindeners in visiting and providing relief packages to several residents. I thank you.
Thank you.
Indigenous villages reject PPP preferred candidates. Ali on desperate mission of the field. The indigenous village elections are nearing completion. The evidence is clear for all to see. The People's Progressive Party's relentless effort to interfere with, manipulate, and dominate the process, stacking villages with their chosen tushos, has been rejected. The vast majority of residents of indigenous villages have opted instead to take an indomitable claim, to stake an indomitable claim to the self-determination, a right for which the PPP has little or no regard. In almost every village, the PPP identified, supported, financed, and campaigned openly for a highly favored PPP candidate for the office of Tushao. The PPP ventured as far as manipulating the qualifying conditions for participating in the electoral process when their preferred candidates faced formidable challenges. Even the nomination process was manipulated. Persons who were nominated had their names removed from lists of nominees in some cases, while in one unprecedented case, the entire process was canceled. In that case, the processes of nomination and election were both conducted on the same day, denying candidates the right to publish their plans. Even in the face of this brazen assault on democracy, the PPP preferred candidates lost. The indigenous village elections of 2024 must be the most manipulated and tampered with of all such elections in the history of Guyana. In spite of this, however, the will of the indigenous peoples and their spirit of perseverance prevailed. Many indigenous folks have attributed the proud exercise of confidence in the conduct of their business of governance to the visits to their villages, conversation with leaders of the APNU, and advocacy on their behalf by the APNU. This resounding rejection by the indigenous peoples has put the Jaglio Ali administration in panic mode. Irfan Ali has mounted a taxpayers-funded campaign as a countermeasure. President Ali yesterday rushed into the Barima-Waini region with a scheduled 7 communities visit over 2 days. The communities identified to be visited are among those that slipped away from the domination and control of the People's Progressive Party. The failure of the PPP's regional chairperson to deliver has placed that chairperson in hot water. Ali sees this as a job for the presidency and is busy sharing out money without a plan on his visits. Meanwhile, the flood-hit villages of the Rupununi that are crying out for support have been abandoned. The opposition APNU plus AFC pledges its continued support to Guyana's indigenous peoples, and indeed all citizens of Guyana, as we continue to work towards taking government and ensuring a prosperous Guyana for all Guyanese. The Rupununi is in crisis. Jagdeo and Ali oblivious to the suffering of the people. Ali is in Region 1, intent on demonstrating to his regional chairperson how to dominate and control the electoral process in village elections. Ali is distributing money as though it is his to give. No plan, no vision, just naked abuse of power over state resources to procure votes. That is Ali's mission. Jagdeo, on the other hand, continues to peddle his lies about the coalition, having no plan for roads and bridges, among other things. These gentlemen attempt to outdo each other and outmaneuver each other, completely oblivious to the hardship and suffering of the people of the Rupununi. Roads have been washed away, bridges have been destroyed, farms have disappeared, and homes are at risk. Schools, health facilities, road transportation, and other services have been disrupted. Clearly, there is no national or regional disaster preparedness plan. This government's response is woeful. The opposition, through its weekly program Nation Watch, alerted government weeks ago of the likelihood of floods hitting the Rupununi. The unfortunate floods in Brazil, following on the heels of a protracted El Nino dry season, served as a good enough warning to the PPP to get its act together. The Jagdeo Ali regime ignored the warning signs. The rains came. The rains came, and with those rains, the suffering of the mostly indigenous population of Region 9. As we speak, roads continue to be washed away by torrential rains. Bridges continue to be blown away by ferocious tides. The food shortage in the region will soon worsen. Diseases, waterborne and others, become a frightening possibility. Citizens are hearing nothing from the Ministry of Health and its state of readiness in this regard. The Public Infrastructure Ministry has issued a statement. That statement spells out the incompetence and ineptitude of the PPP in very clear terms. It is an open admission of the lack of preparedness, the ignoring of readily available warning signs, and the inability of the government to plan and execute maintenance programs. It is clear that this regime thrives on disasters. Disasters permit them to spend state resources in a manner that bypasses scrutiny. It is a vehicle for the transfer of wealth to friends, families, and favorites, while avoiding accountability. One wonders, therefore, if the PPP regime has any real inclination towards ever indulging in proper planning in the best interests of the citizens of Guyana. With the countless billions in infrastructure works, citizens are not getting value for money. However, that does not bother the PPP as it continues to transfer wealth to the favored ones, 1%.
Thank you. At this time, I will open the floor for questions on the press statement, and today we will just be focusing on the press statement. All right. Any other comments before?
Yes, I just wanted to add for the benefit of our viewers and the media that the hardship in the Rupununi is real. Someone I know left the city at 5 p.m. on Wednesday. That vehicle transporting those folks in whose company this gentleman is still at Kurupakari. He left on Friday afternoon. On Wednesday afternoon. Today it's Friday, it's almost midday. And they're still at Kurupakari. They have to navigate washed away roads and a temporary bridge that has been put in place. And when they get to the Pirara Bridge, which has also been washed away, they now have to climb up on an incomplete structure and walk across very narrow beams to get to the other side, where other vehicles will pick them up and take them into Lethem. There are images on social media of persons literally crawling on hands and knees to get across the Pirara incomplete bridge across the Pirara River. And women and children are also involved in that exercise to get from one place to the other. In the meantime, the records will show that in 2023, that's last year, the government of Guyana spent $387.8 billion on capital projects. That's 50% of that budget. In 2024, the capital budget was in the region of $666.2 billion, almost 60% of the national budget. And it's interesting that the capital budget increased from $62.2 billion in 2019 to $666.2 billion by 2024. So in 2023, the spending of this government was more than the spending of any government between 2010 to 2014, specifically 2010, 11, 12, 13, and 14 combined. And now, with all of this money available for capital expenditure, 60% or most of the national budget, the government has not put a single piece of equipment in Region 9 or in any hinterland region for that matter to respond to crisis situations such as these. The government does not have a maintenance program that kicks in during the dry season or that is on standby during the rainy season. These $666 billion target contractors, transferring wealth to contractors' pockets and bank accounts, mostly for coastal operations. In the meantime, the hinterland region continues to be neglected. Today, it is Region 9. If the rains continue, it'll be Region 7. We already had the experience where the Venezuelans built a temporary bridge across the Cuyuni River to get to Ankoko with heavy artillery, and the rising tides of the Cuyuni washed away that bridge, fortunately for us as citizens of Guyana. But that possibility of flooding extends to other rivers in Region 7. What is the plan? The PPP, I tell you, have no plan. As recent as 2 days ago, the road connecting Madhya to out here washed away. Emergency works were undertaken. Temporary fix was achieved. If the rains continue, our hinterland residents are in very, very serious problems. And we're not hearing anything from this government, anything at all indicative of a plan to rescue our people and to make life more bearable for them.
Thank you.
Shanika, I just want to respond quickly to two statements that were made by both the Prime Minister and Minister of Public Works, Juan Edgell, and just bring clarity because of the massive disinformation that has been peddled in the public domain. The first point I want to make, Minister Edgell, and I'm happy he made this statement, and I ask that persons go back and listen, and it will be shared, where he said that the government has money, and he didn't just stop there. He said, we ain't short of money. That was his statement that he made public. And so I call on the government to ensure that compensation is given to those farmers who would have lost millions of dollars in their produce. They worked hard over the last couple of months, years, and they would have lost everything. And many persons as well would have lost millions of dollars in their appliances. And so we hope that an assessment, which is being done by the municipality through the mayor's office and the RDC through my office, will be honored, seeing that we have confirmed by the very statement of the minister that we have money. We know we have money. We just passed the $1.146 trillion. I want to also make two other points where this is the statutory minutes for April of the RDC. And at Action 7, and I'll just read what led up. The Councillor Elise Benjamin Hall had asked for an update on the drainage assessment report to be prepared by the Works Department since 2023, properly documented in our statutory minutes. The Clerk of Council, Mr. Dwight John, who is appointed by the President and can only be fired by the President and reports to the President, would have indicated, and he suggested, that a professional surveyor be hired to undertake the drainage assessment and survey the drainage system in Linden and Region 10. And that report with recommendations to improve the system be submitted to the council, since the administration is unable to do same. Now, yesterday, Minister Edgell blamed Mayor Solomon, the councillors, the regional chairman and councillors. But here it is, the clerk of council, who is appointed by the president, and who the first person that Minister Edgell and the Prime Minister called when they got into Region 10 wasn't the mayor or the regional chairman who were out at midnight on the ground with families. They reached out to the town clerk of the municipality, and they reached out to the REO. I have not received a call up to now from either the minister who entered Region 10 or the Prime Minister. So they reached out to those two executing personnel, who they report to and instruct, by the way. And so the clerk of council committed, this is the action item that he was supposed to execute. He committed to putting the relevant systems in place to have a drainage assessment report prepared for Linden and submit same to the council so that more informed policy decisions could be made by all agencies on the drainage since 2023. Listen, I invite you all to tune in to next Thursday RDC statutory meeting, because the question for an update will be posted. Let's hear what the REO will say when councillors pose the question to him on an update for the survey that was done. As it relates to the statements made by the Prime Minister, in the statement you heard me say that in 2005, Region 10 rescued people from the coastline. When the coast was flooded, Region 10, we provided them with housing. Many of them remained in Linden until day like today. And so the RDC in 2001, when Kokwani was flooded, without support from the government or the CDC, we activated the Region 10 disaster preparedness because we had the structure and we could have easily followed and reached out to those who were trained in the disaster preparedness to ensure that they could have provided leadership and guidance. And so the RDC 10 would have activated the Region 10 disaster as was done in 2021. We activated it in 2024 when we heard of what had occurred in communities across Linden. And we have been in contact with the CDC. They have been calling, we have been providing them with information, etc. I'm trying to remember Miss Morgan is the woman's name from the CDC that has been in contact with my office. So for the Prime Minister to say that no one from the RDC was in contact or took steps to activate those measures to bring relief to our people, he was being dishonest. And so these committees, this committee, the Disaster Preparedness Committee, is necessary. It's a necessary agency under the statutes of the Civil Defense Commission. And it demands the inclusion of the decision makers and organizations and agencies in order for it to function effectively. That is why, and if you listen to the Prime Minister, he was correct. The regional chairman heads the Disaster Preparedness and Relief Committee. The vice chairman is the alternate because he is in Kokwani, and so we would relate and then share information with the CDC and the other agency. And then we had the regional executive officer, Dwight John. He is responsible for bringing to bear all of the government's assets to assist affected people. So if within the first 24 hours or 48 hours, a flooding occurred, but no relief measures from the RDC was delivered to any of these people. Yesterday, I heard them arguing about garbage bags. It tells you that it is the regional executive officer who is appointed by the president failed to execute the decisions of the council on actions under the committee that he is aware of. He handles the money. My office doesn't administer finance, neither is it a revenue collection agency. I want to make that clear. Any funding we can recommend, any funding has to be activated by the regional executive officer approving those emergency funds. And so the mayor and the NDC chairman, Sharma Solomon and Michelle Simeon, they were going to assist with reports coming in from Linden and Kokwani. We had the regional health officer, Dr. Gregory Harris, dealing with matters relating to health. You know, in a flooding situation, you can have a mixture of water for those who have pit toilets. You have to be very careful. You do not want persons to catch things like leptospirosis, etc. Dengue is right now rampant in our country. And so the regional health officer, Dr. Harris, is automatically a part of the disaster preparedness like he was in 2021. You have the Guyana Police Force to deal with law and order, and especially in the context of displaced persons. If you set up shelters, it means that the homes of persons would have been left unattended. And so we wanted to ensure that the police were doing checks in the communities if they could have entered to make sure that persons were not breaking in and stealing persons' things. We had the agriculture officer, Derek Collins, to address the needs of farmers, especially those with livestock that would need feed, or assess the damage and report to the CDC and by extension, the government. You had the GWI in the person of Raul Friday, who's the manager, to ensure that water is cut off at areas where it may be contaminated, to ensure that people do not place themselves at risk. You had the electricity person, Odwin Rutherford, and the KUI persons at Kokwani management, to ensure that power is cut off at submerged areas, but it is kept on at hospitals and at hostels in case, you know, there's an emergency and persons need to be rushed here, or shelters. We had the Chamber of Commerce president, Lyndon Young, to ensure that they bring to bear the concerns of the business community and that they are not cut off from supply so that we do not have a situation where food is not coming into the region. And also those who wanted to support the efforts and come on board, whether it's DDL, banks, DIH, that there was a proper structure for them to deliver whatever support they wanted to give to the flood-affected community. You had the welfare representative, Hewitt Moore, social protection, on standby, as was the case in 2021. You had the CDC rep, Mr. October, the same young lady that I mentioned earlier, that calls every day to get updates. And so there was a structure. We even had the church, and Praise Tabernacle was identified where persons could have come and deliver items. And because we did not want to have anything to do with monies or anything, we told persons you can go to the supermarket, purchase items, and deliver it to maybe one of the church. Pastor Selwyn Sales, who we all know, we refer to him as Linden's pastor, came on board at the last flooding that we had, the last disaster. And so a structure was in place, and we were prepared to provide relief and support to our people. Unfortunately, the CDC has been taking political directives. And so while we do all the compilation of the data and will be able to present it to them on an hourly, I think it was 8 hours, every 8 hours they requested a report. What was most unfortunate is that when the supplies came from the CDC to Linden, you know where it ended up? At the bottom house of a PPP activist in Karkara. It did not come to the disaster committee for it to be distributed. To the point now where you have persons politicizing the distribution of a bottle of bleach and a bucket. Looking at faces, telling people and speaking to them in the most disrespectful manner. Senior citizens in the Poker Street area, it was reported, and it was reported in the Victory Valley area. And so we have to highlight this, and we want to make it clear that unless central government engages the elected component of the council and desists and refrain from doing what it has been doing over the past 4 years, the issues and the things affecting the people of Region 10 it cannot be solved. It cannot be solved. And so I just wanted to make it clear because I know they were on the radio. We are not allowed access to the radio and NCN. And so our views, you would recall we had to tape our mouths. 104.3 is not allowing us to communicate with the constituents. But what they are doing is using those councillors that cannot seem to recover from a democratic blow that they would have received during the local government elections. The candidates that they had on their slate, they have all been given a position, and they were the ones who are distributing hampers, whether they have now turned youth sports and culture officer in the region. Many of them are community development officers. And so what they're doing is attempting to run a parallel council, of course, using political people to achieve their objective. The people of Region 10 will continue to reject them. I thank you.
Is there any questions on the first statement before we close off? I do see 2 others in the room. Today we are taking questions only on the press statement. As you would know, as we speak, the funeral for our dear comrade, Mr. Oscar Clark, is ongoing. And shortly we have some other proceedings regarding a fate. All right, with there being no questions on the press statement, you have some. All right, Mr. Mark Benchcock.
Yeah, good morning. I have a question. I joined late. My apologies. Concerning the treatment, and I know that the chairman may have spoken about that, but is it surprising that the PPP regime love to boast? They love to boast of how much they care about the people of Region 10 and the people of Linden and so forth. Are you surprised, Mr. Chairman, of this bold neglect of the people in times of need by the PPP regime?
I am not, because it has been happening for the past 4 years. In fact, I dare any of the officials in the government side, and I pose the question to them, to list one transformational capital project that this government has executed or initiated or conceptualized during its tenure for the people of Region 10, and you will have none. All of the projects that are being delivered or continued is what was started under the former government. The Linden to Mabura Road, they attempted to remove it. Of course, you know, the UK government told them that if they only do that, they will not be leaving the 55 million sterling pounds with them. For 23 years, a lot of people oftentimes forget that the People's Progressive Party didn't just come to government in 2020. They served for 23 years. There wasn't, they rejected any attempt for those transformational projects to come to Linden. They rejected to put in a robust agriculture program in Region 10. In fact, it was Ashley Singh who said that other regions had a comparative advantage. We would have started a $300 million road from Millie's out at Linden to the Berbice River, so farmers can begin to bring out their produce. I went there, I saw watermelon, I saw belange, peppers, you name it. Edos spoiling in the Berbice River. All that is needed is for that project to be continued that was started under the David Granger administration. They have refused to continue that project. They have refused to release close to $300 million that sits in an account at the Linden Enterprise Network, that the APNU first injected 150 because many persons were repaying. Some, of course, defaulted, but it is the responsibility of the government to ensure that they put measures in place to control and monitor that. That funding has now grown from 150 to 300 million. They have refused to constitute the board. An agro-processing plant that they claim they built at the Watuka area, they placed 2 household blenders in the facility, so nobody can use it. If you check the People's Progressive Party manifesto in the 2020 election, you will see no mention of the bridge across the Demerara River at Linden, bridge in Wisma and Mackenzie. But if you check the coalition manifesto, you will see it listed there. That is a fact. We have seen where they have targeted the region strategically and intentionally, so no, it is not a surprise. If we thought that a disaster might have caught, we thought that they might have been a little more compassionate. Maybe Bishop Edgell is a pastor, but it seems as though he's sitting in the seat of the scornful. We thought that at least he knows me, he could have reached out. And yet he came to Linden and announced boldly. He said that they get money. Money is not the problem. They get money. The Disaster Preparedness Committee, I think, received, Ganesh Manipur said $7 billion. $1 billion in 2021 went, I think it was to Region 6 when they had the flood. Don't come and tell the people of Linden that you're going to just get them a bottle of bleach and a black bucket with a black bag with a soap powder inside and expect them to stay quiet. Also, if you recall, let them 600 families received $1 million each in 2021. What happened? Got by the people of Region 10. The people are equally and should equally benefited from the taxes that are paid by us all. We are the ones, we contribute to our taxes. And so nothing has been done. They have sought to politicize everything. This could have been prevented. You had the tongue anniversary. The mayor reached out to them to clean up the tongue, assistant cleaning up. They ignored him completely. But immediately after the Linden Tongue Week was completed, they found millions of dollars. It is alleged that 77 million was doled out, to the point that they got so confused they started to cut trees in areas that were prone to erosion. This is the first time I'm hearing that. I know people would plant trees. They cut down trees outside of the Mackenzie Sports Club, and now the fence of that facility is possibly compromised if a revetment work is not executed soonest.
You know, I have a follow-up question. Thank you, Mr. Chairman there. And I noticed Mr. Mervyn as well, because there are other areas that are flooded, especially in the interior areas as well, that the PPP regime has also neglected, just as they have neglected the smoke situation in Mocha, Arcadia, and other areas. Mr. Mervyn, do you wish to comment on the PPP's neglect of flooding in other areas too, sir?
Well, that was principally a part of the statement. Sorry you came in late, but absolutely, Mark. The Jagdeo Ali regime is intent on making statements and performing acts to distract people from the reality of the suffering of our people in this country, all across this country, particularly the hinterland and indigenous communities across Guyana. I was making the point, Mark, that a minibus left Georgetown at 5 p.m. on Wednesday. Today is Friday. It's almost midday, and that bus is at Kurupukari Crossing. It has not left the Kurupukari Crossing. It has to traverse very, very badly damaged roads from there. It has to traverse across makeshift bridges. And when it gets to Piraro, people will have to walk across a steel plank to get across the Piraro River, a steel plank on an incomplete bridge, a bridge the construction of which started more than 2 years ago. And until now, there's no decking. The bypass bridge has been blown away by the strong tides. And so now people will have to walk the plank, so to speak, to get to the other side of the Piraro River with their children and with their cargo and so on to get into another vehicle across the other side to get into Lethem. And this is only a sample of what's happening in Deep South Rupununi. There's a particular road that reportedly is under 10 feet of water in Napi to connect people from Napi to Parashara and Hayawa and Kaikumbe and so on. The Napi Village Council had to bring out a boat with an outboard motor to transport people where ordinarily they would have ridden bicycles or motorcycles or traversed with other vehicles. So it is really, really bad. And while that is so, Jagdeo is busy making statements about the APNU not ever having a plan for roads and bridges. But when you look at what the APNUFC did, the evidence is there. The town of Madhya received massive infrastructure investment, concrete roads and bridges, concrete drains. The entire Port Kaituma, which was once a slush path, concrete roads. Mabaruma, concrete roads and drains. Bimichi in the Muruka area, a brand new paved airfield, a high-span concrete bridge across the Muruka River. There are countless examples of what the APNU-AFC accomplished while in government with very small budgets, with zero oil revenue, while the People's Progressive Party now has a $1.46 trillion budget, 60% of which is dedicated to infrastructure projects aimed at enriching contractors, friends, and families, and not designed to bring an ease and a more relaxed and comfortable life for the people of Guyana's hinterland. This is where the trouble is. There is no plan, there's no vision, there's no scope for the kind of development that Guyana deserves. Our money from oil is being squandered, wasted, while our people continue to suffer.
If I may,
Go ahead.
added to the flooding in my constituency on the East Bank, the government continues to neglect the drainage situation for many farm areas. On the highway, I know they have started dredging the creeks to assist the farmers who would have lost millions of dollars in crops, but the dredging was never completed because the machine was in the creek. I don't know if it's the removers yet, but the challenge they had, sometimes they run out of fuel, the driver don't turn up. And because of that, now we have the rainy season, you have those persons suffering. In my community, Mocha Arcadia, the outfalls that are supposed to be dredged and cleared so that the water can flow properly is now being cleaned. Little Diamond is now being cleaned. Then they have to move to the canal number 3 area by the Cocoa to clean. That has not started. And so here again, our farmers continues to lose millions of dollars. Works that should have been done during the dry season is now being taken on. Even currently, we have an issue where a contractor decides that he will throw mud in the number 3 canal, which is a main drainage canal for the area, in the name of building a bridge. And we seem not to be getting the information, but I hope I see that the NDIA would have asked that some of the material be removed, but I would hope that by this weekend, the entire number 3 canal where the mud was dropped to affect the flow of water in the Mocha Arcadia community, all that mud will be removed, and whatever bridge has to be built, that it will be done after the rainy season. It's very sad to see our farmers have to lose millions of dollars after investing their time and their effort to plant and to sow, and not be able to reap because of neglect by the PPPC government.
Mark, you mentioned smoke on the coast, but I want to remind us that there were forest fires in the Rupununi as well at the same time, and those virtually went unreported by the state media and by government in its conversation with the people of Guyana, which are very, very, very few. There was no response from the government to the forest fires. There was a meeting of the CDC in Lethem, and that was all we heard. In the meantime, in the mountains, there were fires. In the savannas, there were fires. People lost crops, people lost livestock, people lost homes, some bridges were destroyed. and the government did not respond. The government was always aware that El Nino will last for up to 7 months, and the severity of the dry season will determine the severity of the rainfalls that will follow. Yet, no measure was taken in mitigating the forest fires, and no measures are being taken now to deal with the flooding situation. It is ridiculous the way we operate, and it is unforgivable that petty matters will engage the government and their spokespersons at this time, when there is a massive crisis in Guyana's hinterland, when there's a massive crisis in Region 10, one of the main mining towns in this country. And as my sister Nima just mentioned, on the East Bank, where people rely on farming for their livelihood. And I'll tell you this, when the PPP said that they were helping the people in the Rupununi by carrying in a couple 1,000 pounds of cassava, you wouldn't believe this. Cassava in Region 3 was being sold for $25 per pound. The PPP used the plight of the people in the Rupununi to enrich their supporters who were planting cassava in Region 3, doubled the price, and bought the cassava to take it in there. Why did they not buy twice the amount of cassava, paying the same price, so that the indigenous peoples of the Rupununi could have benefited in greater measure? And these are the kinds of questions that people need to ask. What is happening for the people at Mocha? Look at what happened for the benefit of the people in Region 3 who were planting and who were PPP supporters. The disparity is clear. The intention appears very obvious to me.
Do I have can I make a final, ask a final question? Sorry, Madam Chair, or that's
Yes,
it?
go ahead.
Okay, thank you. And we are not allowed to go outside of the press conference, right?
No, not today.
Okay, because I wanted to ask
Not today.
Ms. Nima Flubes her take on the congressman's visit to Mocha.
Oh.
But I wouldn't ask, since you said that I can. But if she wants to answer, she can respond to that. But good job, Ms. Bess. My final question also has to do with the chairman and Region 10, specifically in Linden. We usually see some PPP operatives parading themselves as though they care about the mining tongue. But during this flood, obviously contributory negligence by the PPP regime, these individuals, like the acting tongue clerk or whomever else, they're missing in action. They're not there to help the people or to help to coordinate anything other than to bring misery. Thank you, sir.
Well, I agree with you, Mark. Their efforts, or they were placed there, I think, I know, to frustrate the municipality. One would have thought that, you're a Lindener, work in the best interests and put the people first. But the fact that the town clerk during this flood season, despite the mayor was out on the ground at Greenard Street, going to communities 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, rather than work in the interest of the people and share whatever information, I think at this point, if I'm not mistaken, there were hampers that the mayor and councillors made representation for from an organization that it is alleged that the town clerk has refused to release those hampers to senior citizens, which should have been done during the town week period. The funding, that is, for them to go and procure it or secure it. He has refused. I don't know if he has done it by now, but they continue to frustrate both the RDC and the municipality. And as I said, their actions are well known and documented by their principals, because they both report to ministers and by extension to the president. One has to ask, if these persons claim to be genuine about the work that they're doing, why would anyone treat the people who are under their direct responsibility in such callous manner? I want to also say that you would often see a boasting by the Minister of Public Infrastructure of how many footpaths and roads were constructed in Region 10. I would wish if he would now take a walk to see that the integrity, the structural integrity of each and every single one of those footpaths has been compromised. All right, and so like we have been pushing for sensible.
Someone to we're expecting. Go ahead.